I didn't shake. I didn't tear up. I didn't even raise my voice. I just sat across from my mother and my brother at that familiar dining room table, the one with the chip in the corner from when I was 9, and dropped a casserole dish, and I watched them lay out what they thought was the most airtight trap they had ever built. My mother had made pot roast. She always cooks something comforting when she's about to do something cruel. I noticed that years ago and filed it away. It's a habit of hers. Warmth on the surface, something cold underneath. My brother leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. He's always leaned back like that. Even as a kid, he had that posture, arms crossed, chin up, the look of someone who believes the world is already arranged in his favor. And for most of his life, it was. My father arranged it that way. My mother kept it arranged. I was just the other one. The one who got the smaller bedroom. The one whose school plays nobody attended. The one who learned very early that if she wanted something, she was going to have to build it herself, because nobody at this table was going to build it for her. My father passed away 8 months before that dinner. Pancreatic cancer. It moved fast, the way it always does. He was diagnosed in March and gone by July. I flew home twice during those months. I sat with him in the hospital. I held his hand during the nights when he couldn't sleep and didn't want to be alone. My brother visited once. He stayed for a weekend and spent most of it on the phone in the driveway, talking about some deal he was trying to close. My mother told everyone he had been there constantly. I didn't correct her. I had already learned which battles were worth fighting. Before my father died, when he was still lucid enough to make decisions, he updated his will. He had a condo in his name, a 2-bedroom unit he bought in 2019 as an investment property that he'd always talked about leaving me. He left me that condo. He also left my brother the family landscaping business, which my father had spent 30 years building. The business had equipment, vehicles, contracts, a reputation. By anyone's reasonable measure, my brother received the larger piece. I received a condo I had watched my father maintain with enormous care, and which represented to me something far beyond its appraised value. It was the one concrete thing he chose to give me specifically, intentionally, with my name on the paperwork. I am a forensic accountant. I've spent the better part of 7 years helping law firms and federal agencies untangle financial records, trace hidden assets, and identify fraud. I say this not to impress anyone, but because it matters to what happened next. My entire professional life is built on the understanding that numbers don't lie, but people who manipulate numbers lie constantly. I know exactly what fabricated documentation looks like. I know what a forged signature looks like. I know how to read a financial trail the way other people read a novel, following the plot, catching the inconsistencies, noticing when something has been inserted that doesn't belong. I should have turned that lens on my own family sooner. That's on me. 6 weeks after my father's funeral, I started receiving letters. The first one was from my brother. Handwritten, which surprised me since he rarely puts anything on paper. It was brief and vague, something about outstanding obligations related to the family business that he needed to discuss with me when things settled down. I set it aside. I was still grieving. I was still processing the mechanics of loss, the specific, grinding kind that comes when you lose a parent you had a complicated relationship with, when you're mourning both the person and the relationship you never quite had. The second letter came 3 weeks later, this time from my mother. It was longer. She had typed it, which she almost never does. She referenced loans my father took out on my behalf for my college education and for the security deposit on my first apartment. She mentioned a figure. $140,000. She said the family business had carried those debts for years, and that now that everything was being settled, it was time for me to do the right thing and apply my share of the inheritance toward what I owed. I read that letter twice. Then I read it a third time. Then I set it flat on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. I paid for my own college education. I took out federal student loans, worked 2 jobs throughout undergrad, and graduated with a debt I spent 6 years paying off on my own. My father gave me exactly $2,000 toward my first apartment's security deposit. $2,000, not 20, not 30, not whatever my mother was now calling a loan. There was no paperwork, there was no agreement. There was no loan. There was a father who handed his daughter $2,000 in an envelope and said, "Don't tell your brother," and then never mentioned it again. Something was wrong. And because of what I do for a living, I knew exactly what kind of wrong it was. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my brother. I called my father's estate attorney. I requested copies of every document in the estate file. I requested the probate filings, the business records my brother had submitted as part of the estate inventory, and anything referencing outstanding debts attached to my name or my inheritance. The attorney, to her credit, moved quickly. What she sent me 3 days later made me sit down on my kitchen floor. There were 2 loan documents on file. Both listed my name as a co-borrower. On business lines of credit, one from 2016 for $45,000, one from 2019 for $97,000. Both carried my signature on the co-borrower lines. I have never signed a business loan document in my life. I have never been a co-borrower on anything related to the landscaping business. I wasn't even living in the same state in 2016. I was in graduate school in another city entirely. I did what I always do when I find something that doesn't add up. I didn't react. I documented. I printed everything. I photographed the signatures on those documents and placed them side by side with samples of my actual signature from the same time periods, my graduate school applications, my lease agreements, my bank records. The differences were not subtle. Whoever had signed those documents had done a reasonable facsimile of my handwriting but had gotten the slope wrong on my lowercase letters and had not reproduced the particular way I formed the number 9 in my signature date. To an untrained eye, it might pass. To someone who spends their professional life analyzing exactly this kind of thing, it was immediately obvious. My mother and my brother had forged my signature on $142,000 worth of loan documents. I spent 2 weeks being very, very careful. I did not confront anyone. I did not send accusatory emails. I did not tell any other family members what I had found. I simply worked. I compiled the document comparison into a formal report, the kind I prepare for clients. I engaged a second forensic document examiner, someone I trust professionally, and asked for her independent assessment. She came to the same conclusion within 4 days. I retained a new attorney, separate from the estate attorney, one who specializes in probate fraud. And then, quietly, working backward through every piece of paper in that estate file, I found one more thing. My brother had been making draws from the business account since the day my father's will was filed for probate. Not unusual on its own, he was running the business. But 3 of those draws were coded as loan repayments from the estate to himself, totaling $68,000 for debts that had no corresponding documentation. He had been paying himself from my father's estate before it was legally closed, before I had received anything. I brought everything to my probate attorney. She filed a formal objection to the estate inventory and notified the court of the discrepancies. I filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding the forged loan documents. I also did one more thing, which my attorney suggested and which I agreed was exactly right. I worked with my father's estate attorney to expedite the transfer of the condo title into a limited liability company I formed for this specific purpose. It was my property. The estate was clear on that. The transfer was clean and legal and completely above board. But once that transfer was complete, the condo was no longer an asset that could be encumbered or claimed in a civil action against me personally. That took 6 weeks from the day I first read my mother's letter. On a Thursday evening, my mother called and invited me to Sunday dinner. She said she missed me. She said it had been too long since we had all been together as a family. She used the phrase, "Your father would have wanted this." She said my brother would be there, and that we needed to sit down together and work through some estate matters as a family, calmly, without any lawyers involved. I said I would be there. Then I called my attorney and told her I was going to Sunday dinner. She asked me what I wanted to accomplish. I told her I wanted a clear record of exactly what my mother and my brother said to my face, and I wanted to walk out of that house with nothing unresolved on my end because everything had already been resolved. She told me to keep my phone accessible. I drove to my mother's house on Sunday. I sat in the car for a moment before going in. The pot roast smell was coming through the front window screen. I had known it would be. I went inside. My mother hugged me in the doorway, the long kind of hug, the kind that is performing something rather than expressing it. My brother was in the living room, and he gave me the nod, the single chin dip he uses in place of actual warmth. We sat down to dinner. My mother talked about the neighbors, about a tree that had come down in the yard, about a cousin's new baby. My brother ate in the focused, efficient way he does everything. We did not talk about the estate. We did not talk about the letters. I helped clear the dishes. My mother made coffee. And then, with the coffee cups on the table and the pot roast long finished, my brother put a folder on the table and slid it across to me. "We need to settle this," he said. "The business is carrying a significant debt load because of you. We've been patient. Dad's gone now and we can't just keep absorbing this." I looked at the folder. Inside was a printout of both loan documents, a repayment schedule my brother had apparently drawn up himself, and a quitclaim deed already drafted, already listing my name as the grantor that would have signed the condo over to the estate. My mother reached across and put her hand on mine. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is just about being fair. You have to understand how much your father did for you. How much we all sacrificed." Her eyes were soft in that specific way they get when she believes the performance is working. "Family takes care of family," my brother said. He said it like it settled something. I looked at the quitclaim deed. I looked at the loan documents. I turned over a couple of the pages. "I appreciate you putting this together," I said. My brother relaxed by about 20%. My mother's hand patted mine once. "But there's a problem," I said. I reached into my bag and placed a document on the table. It was the title transfer record for the LLC, filed and recorded with the county 10 days earlier. The condo was no longer in my name. It had never not been mine, it was simply now held in an entity that made a quitclaim deed issued to me personally completely irrelevant. The condo isn't mine to sign over, I said. It was transferred to an LLC 2 weeks ago. That's a matter of public record. You can look it up. My brother's jaw did a specific thing, a tightening, then a very deliberate stillness. He picked up the quitclaim deed and looked at it like he could revise it through force of will. That doesn't change what you owe, he said. His voice had shifted. The casual authority was gone. Something harder and flatter had replaced it. What I owe, I said, is nothing. I'd like to explain why. I put a second document on the table. It was the Independent Forensic Document Examiner's report, 22 pages, with the comparison signatures side by side on page 4. I turned to page 4 and oriented it so both of them could see it clearly. These are the signatures on the loan documents you've been referencing, I said. This column is the purported signature. This column is my actual signature, from contemporaneous documents, my graduate school application from 2016, my lease from 2019. The examiner concluded with a high degree of professional confidence that the signatures on the loan documents were not produced by the same person who signed these reference documents. My mother pulled her hand back from mine. What are you saying? She said. It wasn't a question. It was stalling. It was the sound of someone realizing the room they thought they were controlling had different walls than they thought. I'm saying those signatures are not mine, I said. I never signed those documents. I was not a co-borrower on either of those loans. The debt you're describing is not my debt. My brother stood up. He put both hands flat on the table in that way men sometimes do when they want to take up physical space as a substitute for an actual argument. You're calling us liars, he said. I filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office 12 days ago, I said. Regarding the forged documents. That complaint is now part of the official record. I also filed a formal objection with the probate court regarding the unauthorized draws from the estate account. I placed the third document on the table, the objection filing, with the case number at the top. The room went very quiet. My mother stood up and walked to the kitchen and stood at the sink with her back to us. She turned the faucet on, which she does when she needs noise to think through. My brother sat back down. He sat down slowly, the way people sit when their legs stop working properly for a moment. He looked at the documents on the table. He looked at me. He opened his mouth once and closed it. I want to be clear about something, I said, and I kept my voice level, because I had practiced this, because I had sat in my car and in my apartment and rehearsed exactly this moment. I'm not here to fight. I didn't come here today to threaten anyone or to blow anything up. I came because you asked me to come, and because I believe you deserve to hear directly from me what the situation actually is, rather than finding out through attorneys and court notices alone. I paused. But I also need you to understand that I have documentation for everything I just said. The process is already in motion. It was in motion before I sat down at this table. My brother said, "You went to the Attorney General." He said it like he was confirming the headline of a story he didn't want to be in. Yes, I said. Before you talked to us, you sent me a letter with a forged loan document attached and asked me to sign over my inheritance, I said. What conversation were you expecting me to have first? My mother turned around from the sink. Her face had rearranged itself. The softness was gone. What was underneath wasn't grief and it wasn't shock, it was a kind of cold, recalculating focus that I had seen before, throughout my childhood, in moments when one of her plans wasn't working and she needed to pivot. You don't understand how hard things have been, she said. The business has been struggling. Your father made promises. My father made one promise about that condo, I said. He made it to me. He put it in writing. That's the only promise I have documentation for. He supported you your entire life. He supported my brother's future with a business he spent 30 years building, I said. He left me one asset, specifically and intentionally. I intend to keep it. My mother looked at me for a long time. I had the strange sensation that she was seeing me clearly for maybe the first time, not the manageable younger daughter, not the one who could be guilted and maneuvered, but the person I had actually spent the last decade becoming while she wasn't paying attention. This is going to destroy this family, she said. Her voice broke on the last word in a very precise way. I didn't forge anyone's signature, I said quietly. I didn't take money from an estate that wasn't closed yet. I didn't send anyone a letter demanding they sign away property that was left to them by someone who just died. I gathered the documents, straightened them, and placed them back in my bag. I stood up. I pushed my chair in. I love you, I said to my mother, and I meant it the way you mean something that is true and painful at the same time. I genuinely hope the legal process goes as smoothly as possible for everyone involved. My attorney will be in contact with yours. My brother said, "You're making a mistake." I documented everything, I said. Starting from the day I received your letter. Every conversation, every document, every filing. If there's a mistake being made at this table, it wasn't made by me. I walked to the door. My mother didn't follow me. My brother didn't follow me. I let myself out and pulled the door closed behind me and walked to my car and sat in it for a moment before I started the engine. My hands were steady. I noticed that. I had been expecting some kind of physical reaction, shaking, nausea, the delayed adrenaline response that sometimes hits after a high-stakes situation releases you. But my hands were completely still on the steering wheel. I sat with that for a moment. Then I started the car and drove away. That was 7 months ago. The probate matter is still active, which I expected. These things take time. The court has ordered a full forensic audit of the estate accounts, which is being conducted by an independent CPA appointed by the judge. My brother retained an attorney 6 days after that Sunday dinner. My mother retained one 2 days after that. The Attorney General's office sent its first formal inquiry letter to my brother within 3 weeks of my initial complaint. I don't know exactly where that investigation stands. Because it's not my investigation. I made my report. I provided my documentation. And I stepped back. That part is out of my hands. What is in my hands is much simpler than it used to be. The condo is mine. My father left it to me, and it is mine. I've been renting it to a young couple, a nurse and a teacher who take good care of it and pay on time, and once left a plant on the step with a thank you note after I fixed a plumbing issue quickly. The rental income covers the property taxes and maintenance with a small amount left over each month. It's not a fortune. It was never meant to be. It was meant to be a foundation, and that is exactly what it has become. I have not had dinner at my mother's house since that Sunday. I have not spoken to my brother on the phone. My mother sent me a text message on my birthday, just happy birthday, nothing else, and I replied thank you and left it there. Whether there is any road back to something that resembles a family relationship is a question I have stopped trying to answer right now. I used to spend a great deal of energy on that question. I used to lie awake doing the math of what I would need to forgive and what they would need to acknowledge and whether any version of those numbers could ever balance out. I don't do that anymore. What I do is work, and exercise, and keep my apartment the way I like it, and call my friends and sleep through the night. All of which sounds simple. None of which was simple for most of my adult life. There's something I want to say to anyone who has sat in a car in a driveway, trying to work up the nerve to go inside, knowing that the people in that house have a version of you in their heads that is smaller and more manageable than the person you've actually become something. I want to say to anyone who has been handed a forged document and told that it represents a debt they owe for the crime of having been born into the wrong family. Document everything. Not because you're planning for war. Because clarity is the only thing that protects you when someone has decided that your version of events doesn't matter. Paper is boring and slow and procedural, and it is the most powerful thing I know how to hand someone. And second, the most important move I made was not the LLC, not the Attorney General complaint, not the probate objection, not any of the individual tactical decisions that turned out to be right. The most important move I made was the one I made first, before any of that, before I had fully processed what I was looking at. I stopped. I didn't react. I didn't call my mother and demand an explanation. I didn't call my brother and accuse him. I sat with what I knew, and I let it be information instead of an emergency, and then I moved carefully. Emotion is not the enemy. I had plenty of it. I was furious in a way I hadn't been since I was a teenager. I was also grieving, still, and grief and fury together make for a very unstable mixture. But I had one advantage that I think made all the difference. I knew, in a professional and deeply practiced way, that the facts would not change based on how loudly or quietly I felt about them. The forged signatures were forged, whether I screamed about them or whispered about them. The unauthorized draws were in the account records whether I cried at the kitchen table or sat completely dry-eyed in my attorney's office. So I sat dry-eyed in my attorney's office. And I let the facts do what facts do when you document them properly and give them the right forum. They spoke for themselves. The condo is mine. My name through an LLC, but mine is on the title. The rental income lands in my account on the 1st of every month. On the wall of my home office, I have a framed copy of the deed transfer. Not because it's decorative, but because it is a record of the single most important thing my father left me, held exactly the way he intended it to be held. Some mornings I sit with my coffee and look at it for a moment before I open my laptop. My father wasn't a perfect man. He didn't always show up. He didn't always choose the right child to see clearly. But in the end, when it mattered, he made one deliberate decision that was entirely mine. He signed a document and he meant it, and he filed it. I know how to honor a document that was signed in good faith. I do it every single day.